Welcome to Ask the Expert with noted radio host Steve Sleeper. Each week, Steve interviews entrepreneurs and professionals and shares their intriguing stories of success and service. Now, here's radio veteran Steve Sleeper.
And today, our guest on Ask the Expert is Mark Lukehart with the Lukehart firm in Colorado Springs. Mark's a family law attorney. Mark, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for asking.
Oh, good, good. Hey, tell me a little bit about your firm and yourself.
So we're based in Colorado Springs. I office share with 6 other attorneys and 2 other family law attorneys, but we run our separate practices. So there's 7 attorneys in my office total that cover a wide range of practice areas, but we all run our businesses independently. I do primarily family law, so child custody, divorce, division of assets, things of that nature.
Okay, and let's say we're in need of a family law attorney. What should we be looking for?
I think it's important to get a family law attorney that focuses their practice primarily on family law. It's hard to keep up with the current changing events and really develop a strong practice in family law if you're trying to do a host of other practice law areas. So that's number one. Number 2, I think it's important that you have a good relationship with your family law attorney, one that's you feel comfortable in. It's a very emotional time with family law issues, and so people are at a really bad time in their life when they generally come to see a family law attorney. And so you want somebody that understands the issues, that's compassionate. You don't want somebody that doesn't have good personality skills or doesn't communicate well with their clients, because it is important. And if you can't have an attorney that you don't have access to or doesn't understand your problems or is not sympathetic to what's going on in your life, and then you're probably going to end up being unhappy.
Yeah, good point. And one of the things that you mentioned, Mark, is for folks that are going through a divorce, it's an emotional time. It's not the best time in their life. Do you find that people wait too long to file for divorce?
So not always. I think, it's an emotional decision. I think sometimes what happens is people try to, in my experience at least, is they try to handle things on their own without at least getting some counsel, whether they hire an attorney or not. They try to handle things on their own, and then it's a lot more difficult for an attorney to come clean up things than it is to handle them from the beginning. And so, I get a lot of cases where somebody the other party has an attorney, and they try to represent themselves, and they really get taken advantage of. And so it's hard to clean up those issues and get the ship going in the right direction, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly people often try to do their own divorces now in the current environment that attorneys live in. We have a la carte services, so you can either do bundled legal services whereby the attorney, takes your case from day one to the end, and then sometimes people just need help with certain parts of their divorce. Maybe they need help filling out paperwork, or maybe they need help going to trial and things of that nature. And so what you're seeing, at least in Colorado, is some attorneys moving to providing a la carte type services versus a full turnkey package.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes that's good. Sometimes it gets confusing. Again, what I see a lot of is people thinking they can do their divorce on their own, and then they get down the road a bit and things can get very confusing. The paperwork alone sometimes gets confusing. And then if you have someone with an attorney on the other side, it gets really unfortunate. I see a lot of people get hurt that way.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to know about divorce law, and you talked about that a little bit before. That when you're looking for an attorney, pick somebody that primarily does family law, because there's just a lot to know. Colorado, what are the grounds for divorce there?
So it's a no-fault state. And as long as one party feels like the marriage is irretrievably broken, that's enough to get a divorce. So the court doesn't really want to hear about he said and she said this and she did that and she slept with this guy or he slept with that lady. That's not of concern to them, at least as far as the divorce goes. And it may be an issue in some limited circumstances, but generally not. So in Colorado, it's a no-fault state. The only issue that has to be pled or raised is that one of the parties feels the marriage is irretrievably broken. And so that's it. Colorado's an equitable property state, so we're not common. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm having a brain cramp right now, but we're not a community property state is the word I'm looking for. So it's an equitable distribution, and so the court looks at what's fair. Typically the starting point's 50-50, but if one of the spouses is at a disadvantage, they might get more property or take on less of the marital debt. So that's how we do it here in Colorado.
Mediation, is that a tool that you use often?
The mediation in Colorado is mandatory.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so anybody that files a case in Colorado is required to go in good faith to try to resolve their case with a mediator
before it goes to court. And I heard one attorney describe it. A judge had told him that I can look at this thing, I can cut it up with an axe, but if you go to mediation, it's going to be a scalpel. Either way, it's painful. It's just mediation's much less painful, and somebody will actually get to know you. Well,
my position is you never want the guy in the black robe deciding issues about your children, about your assets, things of that nature.
Yeah.
The parent and husband and wife know better, with some guidance from a mediator, how to resolve the case. Because typically when you end up going to a contested orders hearing, you really, both parties a lot of times walk out unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that's, the judge just doesn't know the parties and their particular circumstances that well. And, typically in Colorado, unless it's a very complex case, you'll get 3 to 4 hours, and that's it. And if you can't get your case put on in 3 to 4 hours, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
So it really is better.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Alimony, do you see that much?
So maintenance is what we call it in Colorado. And until the last several years, it was mostly the judge's discretion as to whether a maintenance award, and it still is. But a few years ago, Colorado came out with a formula and a guideline to assist judges. And so initially what we were seeing is that judges were not really embracing the guideline that much. They felt that they knew better than a predetermined guideline as to what the maintenance award should or shouldn't be. But as the years have gone by, I think the courts more and more are adopting the guideline as to what maintenance is or should be. Of course, the underlying issue is does the party receiving the maintenance have a need for maintenance and to maintain their the current lifestyle. Typically, a maintenance case is when one spouse has stayed at home taking care of the kids, and they have put their career on the back burner, and now they have to go out into the world and make a living, and they don't have the tools necessary. So that's typically where you see maintenance. When both parties are gainfully employed, working full-time, have educations, then there's typically an argument that it's not a maintenance case. But it depends on the difference between the parties' incomes. If you have somebody making $1 million a year and somebody making $50,000, of course, there's most likely going to be a maintenance issue.
Right. How about child support?
And so same way in Colorado with maintenance is the courts follow a child support guideline, although that is not, for the most part, is the judges have to follow the guideline. Unlike maintenance, it's where the judges can choose to follow it or not. Child support is more concrete, and unless they have reason not to follow the child support guideline, they are required to follow the guideline.
Okay.
They do not vary unless the parties agree and there's a reason to vary from it. They typically will adopt the child support guideline. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. It's obviously the party's income, the number of overnights, work-related child care, health insurance, things of that nature. We plug it into a formula, spits out a number, and that's what it is.
There you go. Yeah. Is it joint custody most of the time now, or how does that work in Colorado?
Yeah. So we have a joint decision making and parenting time, and they're divided out. And joint decision making is generally the standard that the courts go by, and unless, in fact, the statutes state that decision making shall be joint unless certain conditions are met, and typically unless one of the other parties is out of the country, or there's a domestic violence issue is typically where you see it. If there's a history of domestic violence in the case, and there's no way the parties can co-parent with regard to decision making, then the courts will give decision making to one parent. Otherwise, it's I would say 90% of the time it's joint decision making. In terms of parenting time, I always again, it's a case by case basis. You start off with the premise that both parents have an equal right to have parenting time with their kids, and if they live in the same city, the current environment is 50-50 parenting time, unless there are some circumstances that don't warrant that. For instance, one of the parents is just, not equipped to care for kids on a 50-50 parenting plan. Maybe they have a one-bedroom apartment and they don't have a place to keep the kids when the kids are there, or they miss a lot of their parenting time. There's just a whole range of factors that go into that. But if they're both solid parents and they both have a good home for the kids, judges tend to lean toward a 50-50 parenting plan. There's some studies out there now, and I think the state is reviewing those studies about whether or not 50-50 parenting, though, is always in the best interest of kids. Because what you tend to see is what we call a 5-2-2-5 plan, or there's a 4-3-3-4. There's different plans, but perhaps mom will have Monday and Tuesday, dad will have Wednesday, Thursday, and then they alternate weekends.
Oh, okay.
So that's a lot of moving back and forth for kids. When they're before their school age, it's not so bad. But when you get a kid that's starting school activities, social life, if the parents live close together, it's not a problem. But if you're commuting back and forth, it really becomes an issue for the kids because they want to hang out with their friends, and then they're away for a week.
Yeah, right.
And out of the loop. So there's some changes, I think, coming in the future with regard to that. But I think now, typically, you see a lot of 50-50 parenting plans.
I knew a dad that when they got divorced, he had no issues about giving her the house, but he bought a home in the neighborhood. You know, it was just up the street. He didn't want to be able to see the house, but he wanted to be close enough where the kids could walk there. You know,
and that's a perfect situation because now kids can go to school, see their friends every day, come home after school, have their social activities and their friends, and just go to a different house.
Right.
You know, and there are some, and it's not very common. There are some where you have a parenting home where, you know,
yeah, that's
dad
right.
spends the week at home in the house, and then mom stays in an apartment, and they flip-flop every other week.
Mm-hmm,
so the kids can have some stability. You know, the kids want their own room, their posters, and their environment. So, you know, when they go to one parent's house and perhaps they don't have all of their things, they don't feel like they're part of the family when they go to their other house. So those things are really important.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the most common question you get, Mark?
The most common question I get is, well, let me say this. There are a lot of what I call Google lawyers out there. So
yeah.
People get their information off Google, and you know, sometimes it's accurate and sometimes it's not, and sometimes you get a lot of argument. But mostly it's the biggest issue is that I deal with. Now, some of my colleagues, I mostly deal with a lot of parenting, child custody issues. Some of my colleagues in my office do really high asset cases, and so they're dealing with mostly really large financial issues.
Right.
So the biggest issues I deal with are parenting time, and typically when you first or prior to filing a divorce, and when you initially first file a divorce, there's a parent that doesn't want to give the other parent access to their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of the biggest issue that I deal with. You know, typically, unless it's a really large asset case, people can divide their stuff up, and it's just stuff. You can get new stuff.
Right.
I like to say that. But, you know, the biggest issues that I see and the biggest question I have is issues involving, can he or can she keep the kids away from me, or can he or she drain the bank account? Because I see that a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
One party angry, before they file a divorce, they go wipe out the checking account, and the other parent doesn't have anything.
Yeah.
That's really can be frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, how can we reach you?
So, you know, my office phone number is 719-418-0769. And you can email me at mark@lukelawco.com. And that's my website. You can also access www.lukelawco.com, and you can fill out an inquiry form on the website.
Oh,
so those are the
very good.
3 ways to get me. Yeah.
There you go. And our guest today on Ask the Expert has been Mark Lukehart with the Lukehart Law Firm in Colorado Springs, one of my favorite towns. And if you're ever in need of a family law attorney, give Mark a call. Mark, I appreciate you being on Ask the Expert today.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Ask the Expert with Steve Sleeper. Join us next time as entrepreneurs and professionals share their intriguing stories of success and service.